going to start out then with Scott Rubel. He's got a last name that's tied to this castle. Scott.
Well, yeah, I'm Scott, and I grew up here, so I'm the only family member who's still involved in the place. John's basically a family member too. He's a old family friend. You know, his family goes back with the Rubels to the 1930s. Frank Landon here. This is the first time we've had him on a tour, but he's offered to help, and we're really happy to have him. If he goes with either John or I'll let him do a lot of talking because his memories are 20 years older than mine are.
Yeah.
So he was here from the very start, the groundbreaking. He grew up with Michael, the castle builder.
From about age 2 on.
Yeah, they were childhood friends.
Wow.
So you can go ahead and introduce yourselves even more if you want.
Well, Mike and I got in all kinds of trouble. And, we hiked the mountains a lot. And he was a very interesting guy. He was a very bright man, but he didn't like formal education. So he educated himself and very well, but he did it the hard way.
And he had a great consultant who was an engineer.
I am a licensed engineer. I tried to get the steel where it should be, but I wasn't there. It went anywhere.
Yeah.
But in any case, if you have any questions, I'll let these guys take the lead, and then if you need to fill in the voids, I'll do my best.
And Frank had a lot to do. There's an aspect of this place we rarely talk about when we're giving tours because it's kind of all defunct now, but Frank was the developer of the very first alarm systems and lighting systems on the whole property. This place is wired to the hilt, and Michael could sit in his bedroom and he had lights all over the walls of his bedroom that would tell where people or animals were walking all over the property.
Oh,
and it was all done with home. It was before you could just go buy the stuff at Radio Shack. He developed all these.
Best Buy now.
I was going to talk about how old he is. But he developed all this stuff from scratch. All the old, we had electric eyes in the walls. You'd break beams and it would light up things in Michael's room and set off little buzzers and alarms. And
See, I learned something I didn't know
cool.
because I'd seen that back in the day in his room, but I didn't know it was you.
Well, I sketched it out for him, and then he put it together. Whatever he found that was convenient.
That's right.
So some of the connections and the conduit and stuff like that is a trip in itself. You'll find water pipe in the middle of conduit. Hopefully not water too. Anyway, if you have questions, come to me. That way it doesn't slow down the entire group.
Yeah, and I guess. Go ahead.
I was going to. We'll probably take different routes so that we have a smaller group and so forth. So,
Yeah. So
There's a lot to see.
Yeah.
There's a lot to see, but you'll catch it all. But it's just, or at least all that we can show you.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah. So once we get inside, we'll kind of split in half. I guess let's just tell a very short story of the history of this property. This is about 2 acres inside the walls of what's left of over 100 acres of orange grove. These orange groves, this property was all bought by Arthur Bourne in 1926, and he came to town, and he was already a millionaire. His money came from the Singer Sewing Machine Company.
He was vice president.
Yeah, he was, and his father and grandfather had been CEOs. He built his mansion in 1934 around the corner here. Glendorans call it the Singer Mansion because of the sewing machine company.
It's like 40 rooms.
Yeah, and all the ranchers up here, this was all orange grove, and everybody was a rancher, and they all employed the children to do the crappy work, like lighting smudge pots and killing the gophers. And Skipper and Michael were those boys for Mr. Bourne. So
and other.
Yeah.
I'd get a call at 3 o'clock in the morning when it was really cold. be at such and such an address at 3 o'clock, the light up.
Right.
Then I'd know. Couldn't wash it off.
And Mr. Bourne retired when Michael was only 9 years old, so Michael was losing his first job. And they really liked each other. Michael, as a 9-year-old boy, told Mr. Bourne, well, I want to live here. And Mr. Bourne, of course, thought that was cute and moved away to Lake Tahoe, and he spent the 1950s selling off all his acreage here. And these 2 acres were left. It couldn't be developed because it was too expensive. There's all these steel buildings and a reservoir to fill in. So he donated it to the Grace Episcopal Church. And
Which I'm sure was a great write-off.
yeah. And they owned it for a few years and decided they couldn't make any money here either. So my grandmother was on the vestry of the church and was in all these meetings and saw the direction it was heading. And by the time Michael was 19 years old, 1959, she was able to help him buy it cheap. So he moved in at the age of 19. And you'll see where we lived, and he took up residence in the packing house, and our bedrooms were all the old refrigerators. And then we spent the rest of his life developing this property and building the castle.
And can I say something real quick about Mr. Bourne? So the way that this place happened was Michael's personality. Not only was he super smart and wanted to do it and obsessed with doing it, but he was able to get hundreds, if not thousands, of people to do very hard labor for free because they wanted him to succeed on it.
People would just show up.
Right.
Yeah.
And one of the things when I would talk about Mr. Bourne, my father, who grew up right around the corner, told me that everyone in town knew him as Chummy Bourne, which is sort of like calling a bald guy curly, because apparently he wasn't very friendly, except for Michael, and he had this thing, and Michael and he had this thing with almost everybody.
Right.
Not quite everybody, but almost everybody.
He had a gift.
He had a gift. So that's really a really important part of how this place became what it is.
Yeah.
Well, when this was all intact, it was all fenced and way into the Bourne home. It was 2 big gates down on Sierra Madre Avenue, and with nothing but, you couldn't see anything but orange trees.
Yeah.
And every time Mike and I would go by there, we'd ring the bell and run. So that's how Al Bourne finally came around, and I'll join him, not fight him.
Yeah. Well, and the house, I mean, the property just for the house was so big, originally the driveway, the front entrance was on Sierra Madre, that big street down there, and the back entrance was Palm Drive up here.
Right.
So that's how long this driveway was, as long as this, number of blocks of this street.
And go on in, and then we'll split up after the.
Well, when you yell, you try to tell your friend about it. Not believe the word.
I've been doing our horse right here.
Make sure you pass the gate, so it will close by itself.
And watch your footing, guys. There's uneven ground everywhere.
Yeah.
So watch your footing.
Remember, you signed the rules.
Like this right here. Just watch where you're planting your feet.
Okay, so my group, we'll start here, and then we'll sort of we will take different paths. But as you can see, hey, look, there's a big old castle. And it took over 25 years to go from to make it from the time they started digging the trenches to finally when the clock tower was done. And we'll talk a lot about the clock tower a little bit. But this place was made mostly with found, donated, repurposed items, things like that. Most of the rocks were gotten out of the San Gabriel Canyon. There's millions of them there. And they would just go in, load them up. When I was a kid, I did a couple of those trips with him. He had a benefactor who actually paid for all his cement. I'll tell you a story about that a little bit later. But he also had, a lot of people who lived here with him, known as farm hands, and because it's known as Rubel Farms sometimes. One of them was a guy named Kurt Billings. And apparently Kurt had told Michael that, if you're going to have a castle, you should also have a stable. So as you can see, there's a stable here. And for you car guys, you can see there's 2 horses and a miniature horse, so that's 2.5 horsepower. Actually, the owner of the horses told me that joke today. So. But Kurt Billings, who's one of the guys who lived here and helped to build this castle, he came with the idea, you really need a barn. So this, in back of us, is called the Billings Barn. And it has one of the coolest things that I like about this place. And there's hundreds of examples of it, but just using what they had to make what they needed. And if you look over here, this is like a valve handle for turning on and off something. He welded it to a gear, put a chain here, and that's how you open the door.
Oh, that's cool. Very cool.
So anyway, there's lots of examples of things like that here. Just they had what they had. There's one in one of the towers where they had like a hand jigsaw, but I guess it got broken, so they just stuck it in, and that was the handle for the door. So I think what we're going to do, because we're going to look through the caboose, but just so that we're not mixed up with this, we'll go to the cemetery. Cemetery. Okay.
Let's do it. We'll follow you.
Okay. All right. Well, let's go. Follow me. We're going to go through the cemetery. Ooh.
See the ghost,
Curtis.
See the ghost.
And I'm buried there too.
Oh yes, Skipper is. He is. They're mostly people who aren't here, but a couple who still are.
So this is an actual cemetery, so to speak. They're just headstones, right?
They are just headstones. So you're not desecrating anybody's grave by standing here. But why is there a cemetery here? Well, I'll tell you. So what happened? Michael had a lot of friends and a lot of people who wanted to help him build his castle. One of them was a guy who owned a monument company, and so he would give him scrap granite and stuff. And when we go in the castle, you can see some of that. And so every once in a while, I'd call him and say, you can pick up some granite. So he'd come over there and he'd pick it up. And then one time he was picking it up, and there was somebody's gravestone was there. And he said, oh, you made a mistake. You put this in there. I said, yeah, we made a mistake. We spelled his name wrong, or put the dates wrong, or something like that. Or sometimes they didn't pick them up. So there's a few of them. So probably about a quarter of these are from there. And then they decided, well, let's make a nice graveyard. So and to tributes to people who were important to the castle and so forth. And for instance, here's Michael's father right here. Here's Michael's mother right there. Neither of them are buried here. When they decided to do that, got an engraving kit, and this was their test. It's an old Western yarn. It is. Here lies Lester Moore, 4 slugs from a 44. No less, no more. And there's some dogs and cats and stuff buried over there. So there's now when Michael died in 2007, of course, he needed his own, and so this was built for him, and it has all the Michael stuff. He had always signed his thing with this little like, he loved Don Quixote, so there's a little Don Quixote thing right there. And in the spirit of the castle, if you want to come take a look at the back of it, it's actually somebody else's. So it's to that. And then, well, you were up here looking at it, so I want you to stand here and read what's on the bottom loud enough for everybody.
I got it. Please move over. You're standing on my stomach.
He's not buried here, so. But Michael had a great sense of humor, and I think he would really, really enjoy that. Isn't that great? Anyway, so there's lots of here, and then over by this tree, where is it? This one? Oh yeah, there's one for actually people who didn't die, but it's the Great Tunnel Disaster of 1965, which included Skipper Landon over there. So I don't know, some of those people may not be with us anymore. Skipper. Skipper, can you tell us about the Great Tunnel Disaster for which is your memorialized?
Well, the tunnel was right over there. And
Right.
It collapsed on us.
And
And we couldn't go any further, so 8 of the people perished, unfortunately, there.
not really, there, but yeah, no, there's proof right there, including that guy. But he rose from the dead. and
Yeah,
came
I
back.
clawed my way back up out of
So,
the
so
Being a tunnel.
yes. Anyway, so, but I think most everybody else is, and out of there's probably some of those people who aren't with us anymore, I imagine. But,
Oh yeah, many of them. So, a lot of the older benefactors, yes.
okay, well there.
So they get a stone. but not
And
their
No, I
bones.
mean on your memorial plaque for the tunnel disaster specifically.
I think probably
No.
only one left.
Okay. It works like that. All right, well, let's continue on. Was sort of the last piece of this. Technically, the castle had been finished in 1986 when he got his clock working, and you'll hear it on the hour, and you'll hear it pretty soon on the half, unless we just missed it. And it was. And that was finished in 1986, but a little bit later, he got this. Michael was a huge train buff, and he loved, he had gone all over the world on trains and so forth. And from what I hear, is his ambition was to have a locomotive, a car, and a caboose, but he never got the locomotive and car, but he did get the caboose. A good friend of his had
No,
owned
he
this.
was given a locomotive. We just couldn't get it here.
Oh, really? See, now I'm glad that Skipper's here, because
We would have to shore up. We had to post a $100,000 bond, which made it impossible from the beginning, and we had to shore up every single bridge on every street
oh, okay. So
where that locomotive, because it weighed way more than those.
what year was this?
5 years before the caboose. I
Okay,
don't know.
So
the
this was
exact-
89, so that would have been 84.
Yeah.
So the castle was almost finished, but not quite at that time.
Yeah, he wanted to be able to put it up on blocks and be able to run the steam engine and make it.
No, yeah, Michael loved machinery, and he was a great mechanic. Wow. But anyway, so what he did, a friend of his had owned this, and it was in San Dimas, and a little bit of a parallel between the two, in that, Michael, when he started this thing, the city was not happy about it. There was no wall up around anything, and for a few years he was amassing stuff to build this, and they were digging these tunnels, and and Michael was in his 20s, and he had younger kids here, and somehow the city thought it was like some sort of hippie commune or something.
It was.
Well, but Michael was anything but a hippie, right? And anyway, so they're trying to do this. They tried to shut off his water and his electricity and stuff like that. But the guy who owned this had it in San Dimas, and it's right off the Arrow Highway. And I guess the city of San Dimas said, that's an eyesore. You got to, and it's like, too bad, it's my property. And but after a while, it sort of became a landmark, like this. I mean, now there's a sign on the freeway, the Rubel Castle Historic.
We saw it.
And he became Citizen of the Year of the Glendora. But back in the day, it was not so easy. So when his friend moved, he the city wanted it. He said, "No, I'm going to give it to my friend Michael." So he paid to have it shipped over here, and they had a whole crew of people in front with poles lifting up power lines and things like that. Took a crane, got it in here, and it's more or less as you would see a caboose from the 40s. There's a bathtub in there, but of course they wouldn't have that in a working caboose, so they took out some bunks because it's now used. Guests can actually stay there and so forth. So anyway, go through there. Be very careful, especially coming down. Remember, you all signed the release.
Yeah, right.
That is a telephone.
Yeah, you see that? Yeah.
A rotary dial.
Trained men only. For trained men only.
Oh, I see that.
Know where you have to second receiver and you got to
Oh, yeah.
the ear thing you got to speak into it. That was really before my time.
Yeah, but it's,
Wow, look at the stove.
it still doesn't look like it.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah, I mean, I recognize what it is. Little table.
There's the bunks. Again,
This is an antique too, the lighter.
train men only.
This
We
is
we got one just like that.
that's a Costco if I ever saw it.
I don't think I've ever been inside like it.
Hmm.
What do you think they would? I would think they would.
What do you notice, Marty?
And that's the caboose.
Well, you got a chain there, right? So the smart thing to do is to put a chain guard on it.
Things I want to look at. The windmill was originally very, very important to this because what happened is I mentioned earlier that the city was not happy with all of this. None of this was permitted, by the way. And so one of the things they did to try to encourage the folks to leave was to cut off all the water and the electricity and so forth. So, but you know, Michael was not going to let anything stand in his way. So he had heard about a windmill up in Lompoc from a farmer. And so they went up and Skipper was very much a part of that. So maybe he should tell the story. I don't know.
Well, we knew that the gearbox up on top there was very heavy. We didn't realize how heavy it was, but we knew it was very heavy. And so it was on a steel tower, didn't have control. And so we figured, well, we'll cut a couple of towers and we'll rope from the other side and lower it down. And we took 6 large mattresses and we put them on the ground, stacked up where we thought it'd end up. Well, it didn't. It just missed it by about 1.5 feet. And so we broke the casing, which is the gearbox. That weighs almost 3,000 pounds. And so we were able to braze it all back together, make it work, and it worked fine, holds oil. But that is a 20-foot Chicago Aero motor, which are not made anymore. They make 16s, and I think they may make an 18. But it's it used to have a washing machine that would actually windmill would power it and rock it back and forth.
But the washer was still zoned there, but it's not in working order anymore.
Yeah, it kind of shook itself, it cleaned itself up.
Right. So, but this is one of the places I want to, thank every one of you for coming because, again, originally this was on steel legs, but I guess they couldn't keep the steel legs, so they used telephone poles. But these telephone poles were probably 50 years old at the time they used them. Plus it, and when Michael was building this place, anything wood, he used to just soak in creosote. I remember walking in here and you just smell it. But it hasn't been done, so you can see it's starting to go, and because this is 50 or more years later, and so this place is going to take a lot of money. We're in a rehabbing project right now, but the emphasis is the castle itself. But your $20 really helps us to keep this place going. So thank you very much. Tell your friends and so forth. So I like to do that. Here's something that was not around when Michael was around, but it's very much in the spirit of the castle. It's a compost separator. So there is a garden over there, and they use a lot of compost. And so if you look at this, basically put a bicycle frame onto some, I don't know what this frame is for, but it's for something. There's some chicken wire around some bicycle in, and then so have one person who shovels the compost into here, and then you go like that, separate it, and then it's all done. So I think that's very much in the spirit of the castle.
That's pretty cool.
Now this tank right here, when Michael, when he was building this place, Glendora is very much going from an agricultural community to a bedroom community. And so a lot of the farmers were, selling out to developers and so forth. And when that happened, and Michael knew all of them, he would say, hey, can I go over there and see what I need? And a lot of these tanks came from farms for irrigation and so forth. And this was the swimming pool. So you can see these pillars right here. There used to be boards coming to there. Unfortunately, they started to rot and we had to take them down. That's not the priority to get back to that. But so I remember as a kid coming here in the summer and visiting my grandmother and helping him haul some rocks around. And then, we'd come here and swim in the afternoon. You guys are from Ventura, so it doesn't get so hot there, but it gets hot here in Glendora. And, so it's nice. They'd have a grill up there, and it was just a very, very pleasant thing. And there is water in there and so forth. There's actually fish that eat the mosquitoes and things. All right, well, let's continue on. You'll see some chickens and roosters and stuff around. This is their home, but they just wander around the property. There used to be a lot of peacocks, but for some reason they don't show up as much anymore. You probably saw as you drive in the signs that say don't feed the peacocks. Well, that's pretty much Michael's mother's fault. She was given a pair of peacocks like pre-Castle in the 60s and brought them here, and all their progeny sort of took over Glendora, and they're very, very beautiful, but they also are very destructive. So Glendora, I think about a year and a half ago, decided that we're going to take them to a farm. I don't know, but there's still a couple around. You used to see them a lot around here, but somehow they don't go to the castle as much. So we're going to go into an area that was really the heart of the citrus business when Arthur Bourne had his citrus business. And this was originally the caretaker's house. It's called the Tree House. Originally there was an oak here with a spiral staircase, you can see that, but the oak got diseased and they had to take it down. There is somebody who lives there.
What kind of car is that?
That is a 1929 Studebaker. So yeah, you guys are car guys. So
Yes,
come here.
we want to see the cars. Yeah.
One thing that's unique about this car is when Studebaker made them, you could tell how many cylinders it had because it had this. But Michael's grandfather, who had this, said he didn't want to just have 6, he wanted to have 9, so he turned it upside down. So that's why it says 9 rather than 6. Now this is pretty cool. I like this one. It's a Mercedes-Benz parade car. And you can come in and take a look. It's you can see that it has this removable top and everything, so people can sit out the back and wave and all that kind of stuff. And apparently it once belonged to the French government, but then they took it in 1957. But they had it for a couple of years, and then they sold it, and it ended up in San Francisco, and then ended up in Pomona, where Michael bought it in 1961. And it does need work on it. But one of the things it had, being part of the French government, it had a telephone. And so Michael used to like to, when he was driving around town and he'd see somebody he knew, he'd pick up the phone. And of course, it didn't work. It was like hooking up the French radio or something. But back then, it was pretty impressive to have a car phone. Now you just go, oh, hang up and drive. Pay attention to your driving. The original entrance to the property was up on Palm Drive. So it came down here. It was later changed to Live Oak over there. But you can see here, this was the box factory.
Box?
Because Mr. Bourne had his own business. He made his own boxes, and he had a stand down on Route 66 we sold. He also did mail order, kind of a fancier thing like Harry and David or something like that. And so he had his own box factory. And what happened was when Michael first got the property, they were moving in, and they were all staying at the packing houses up there. And we're going to go inside it. It's now known as the Tin Palace. It's an amazing place. And but he had a guy he had just met, a guy named Glenn Spear, and Glenn helped him move into the place, and then he was like, well, you know, I kind of want to get away from my, they were like 19 years old, get away from my mother too. Maybe you can rent that place to him. And Michael said, yeah, I guess, but you know, doesn't have any plumbing. You know, barely has a, said, don't worry, I'll fix it up. So he moved in here and he put in the windows, he put in the balcony, and he put in, there's a sunken bathtub, you can see the bottom of it over there. And it's the only place I've never been in, but apparently it's fantastic. Anyway, and I was about 2 years ago. Glenn now lives. I think he may have moved to Washington, but he was living in St. John in the Virgin Islands, and I was vacationing there, not on St. John, but I said, I have to go and spend the day with Glenn because I talk about him every week. So spent the day with him, and he told me all kinds of cool stories that I'll tell you later as we get to those parts. So
You may have covered this earlier, but how many full-time residents do you have living here?
There are 6 residences and I think 9 residents.
Right, that live here full-time?
That live here full-time.
Yeah.
So,
Someone live up in this tree house?
yeah, so somebody does live in that tree house. But,
And do they, anybody in?
yes, and somebody lives in there. So there's 3 that are outside of the castle, 1, 2, and there's another one that actually overlooks the castle, and 3 that are inside the castle. So,
Renters or family?
renters. So that's part of what keeps this place going. All the people who live here also volunteer and help keep it going.
I would imagine maybe there's a waiting list to get.
You know, I don't. I could have lived here. I got married here, about where she's standing, and at the time there was an opening at the treehouse, and Michael said, "Hey, you guys want to move in?" Because Michael was alive at the time, and it wasn't practical for us. I mean, for one thing, it's very small, and my wife and I were working on the west side, and all that. But of course, he knew my brother too, and he said, "But I bet Dave would like to." So I called my brother and said, "Hey, do you want to move into the castle?" And he said, "Yeah, I do." So he lived here for about 7 years. So,
Oh, wow.
so it was cool. Anyway, there you go. So let's continue on here. The car guys are like cars. Tractors. I don't know if you do this or not, but Studebaker started as a wagon company. There's an old Studebaker wagon. You got a Buick, you got a Chevy, you got an International. None of these run at this moment, and you know they would need a pretty major restoration to get going. And you know maybe somewhere way down the road that would happen, but certainly not the priority. It's a wannabe Corvette. This truck, by the way, very much works. It's usually in the parades, and you see like the movie theater seats here. That's because as you go down the parade, you have people waving on it and so forth. But I love this tractor. It was basically built from parts. So back in the day, I think this was from Montgomery Ward. You could buy a Montgomery Ward engine, and then you put it on a.
There it is. Here.
There you go.
It's working.
Yeah.
All right.
And it's going to go 12 times because it's on daylight savings time already. Because there's a story behind it. It's not that easy to change the time on it.
Got it.
That way you get a chassis, you put your engine in there. You can even have a crew or rocks back there for that. But this was used to help build the castle. And this one still does run. This one very much runs. This is an interesting thing. I used to have it parked the other way, which I like because it actually has an electronic ignition, but it was when the electronic ignitions weren't as reliable, so you could still do the crank thing. So it has the crank in the front.
Why is there a certain portion?
You can see the heart of the business. Like there's this lift here that you work on vehicles, the farm vehicles, and later it worked. I don't know if it still works or not.
Yeah, this whole area was donated or given to keeping everything running. Because back in those days, they didn't have a lot of places where you could go get things fixed. It was solid citrus as far as you could see.
And then again, this is part of why developers didn't want this property, because stuff like this that they'd have to get rid of to.
And the reservoir, particularly.
And the reservoir, yeah, because it's a almost 2 million gallon reservoir that would take a lot to get rid of.
And it was hand poured with wheelbarrows.
Wow.
Back 1901.
Wow.
Collect all that rainwater coming down out of the
Well,
San
no,
Gabriels.
there's water tunnels.
Oh, really?
They got hand-dug water tunnels. Wow. And it's that's a story in itself. There's 3 of them, and they have cast iron, high pressure cast iron pipes that come down from the water tunnels. And Michael, when he first moved in here, he realized that he had high pressure water off those lines, and so he was using it here. And then the city found out about it, and they say, well, we own all the water in the area here. So they wanted it, so Michael said, okay, I'll just open the valve and give it to you. We'll blow up their pipes. And what can I say, other than the fact that the city initially was not happy with us.
Yeah.
And once we were out of sight and out of mind, everything got better.
Got better.
Now, we don't have to put up with peacocks anymore. We used to have about 25 peacocks here, and nobody could sleep in the neighborhood because, you know, they'd go, help, help, about 3 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, jeez.
And I heard my best description of peacock. They're like a supermodel. They're very pretty to look at, but they live on cocaine and cigarettes, so don't mess with them.
And they're also as dumb as rocks.
So this was originally again for the citrus business, fueling the trucks and so forth. But one of the things Michael would do is he kept his eye on sort of the wholesale gas prices and went down. He'd try to get a good deal on it and so forth. And one of the ways he paid his volunteers was to fill up their cars with gas. And and a lot of this was during the. Yes, you're right. Many of you remember the Arab oil embargo and where gas prices went. Of course, they went from like 25 cents to 75 cents, but still, that's a huge increase. And
all the lines in gas stations.
alternate. You can only buy it every other day.
We could come over here and get gas anytime we wanted. I'd come over with my motorcycle. I didn't take it.
But it was a way that he showed appreciation to the people who helped him build this and so forth. And it was a nice thing to do. Now this is one of my favorite stories, and Skipper was involved in this too. So this. If you look back here, and you can go up there and look at it, with those huge flywheels and so forth. It's a Western pump engine, and it's known as the barbecue engine. The reason why is that, well, we'll get there in a second. The way he got it, and this is pre-Castle. This is probably 1963 about. Anyways, it was before the castle was truly built. And Skipper and Michael, knew these mountains because they would hike up there and everything. And they knew that this was up there somewhere, and also knew it hadn't been used for a long time. And so Michael said, "Yeah, we will. I'd really like that." So, and Skipper will correct me if this is wrong. This is a story I tell.
Okay.
And I might be wrong, but it may be a better story than the real one. But so originally they went up there and with sledgehammers and tried to get it over, and it's like, it's not going to work. So Skipper knew a thing or two about dynamite. And so they got some dynamite and drilled holes in there, lit it up.
It was primer cord. It was even better.
Oh, okay. What was it?
Primer cord.
Okay. I don't know.
That's like it.
Well, I'll keep saying dynamite because
RDX.
people can. Well, high explosive. What? Anyway, well, they put it in a strategic place, blew it up, and it loosened it enough that.
Story's right, but it's for the big engine up there.
Oh, really? I thought
this one came out of San Dimas orange grove up near the mountains. The other one came out of the orange grove that was right by that nursery over there. And when we tried to blow the corners off the foundation to be able to lift it off, we blew down the nursery plants for like 100 feet all the way around, because this was right up against the fence of the nursery. And so we made sure we weren't anywhere around. We saw the big flash and then heard the report, and we were like 5 miles away. And then in the newspaper it said, mysterious explosion.
By the way, the reason this is called the barbecue engine is, and you can see him hauling it. There's a picture there where they're putting on the back of the truck and so forth and hauling it back. But so Michael, this is pre-Castle, but he wanted to keep the tradition of Easter parties alive, because that was the big social thing in the citrus community. And so he got this, and he wanted, Michael loved machinery. He's a really great mechanic. And he wanted to get it going. He wanted to get it going for the party. And it still runs, by the way. There's yeah, they both do. There's a association called Western Antique Power Associates, and they come here like at least once a year and keep it running.
Wow.
And anyway, but the reason it's called the barbecue is he got some straps on the thing, and it powered down to like a hibachi or something like that with a couple of chickens on it, and it would rotate the chickens as they built them as part of food for the party.
Now this engine is 20 horsepower. It's called a hit and miss engine, so when it's running it goes kaboom, 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 because the governor keeps it going at a speed that's pretty low. It's like 300 RPM. But so it's 20 horsepower at 300 RPM. Now the one up here in the little stone house up here, that's 60.
But it's a much bigger engine.
And both of them were brought here rolling on their flywheels.
Must have missed. What does the motor do? Or it's just a motor?
Well, I mean, this used
It's
to
a natural
pump.
gas-fired motor pump water.
Right.
Yeah.
That one was used for the same reason.
Right, and this is bigger. And one of the things that Michael did with this one, and we can go up there and look at it, it's pretty much the same thing, just bigger.
A lot bigger.
A lot bigger. But one of the things that Michael wanted to do with it was, this one's called the bird bath engine. And you can see off to the right there's a bird bath. So he would pump the water through, and he thought it'd be great for all the birds and everything.
Hey, John, I'm sorry to interrupt. What are these types of trees here?
Those are Morton Bay figs.
Okay.
Now, these were planted by Michael when he first got the property, and unfortunately planted them way too close to the Tin Palace, because you can see that they're starting to. So these may need to come down, which is not good. But I mean, it's also you can see some of the figs that drop on it from them. But they're Morton Bay figs.
I'll be darned.
Anyway, so this one he was going to use to pump water to the bird bath. The problem was, as the water goes through the engine, it gets very hot, and the birds don't like it. Also, it makes a lot of noise.
Wow. So this is the 60 horse motor.
If you get in here and run faster, you could be 61.
He said it was brought here rolling on this flywheel. Heavy duty steel.
Wow.
So this was all for a little bird bath.
Now, why were castles traditionally built? Protection, exactly. So there's a lot of protective elements coming in here. So especially if you're on your horse and you're riding in and the bad guys were behind you, well, if you made it in here, this is called a portcullis, so your compatriots could close it and keep them out. But you can't count on that, because maybe they would be able to go in there. So there's a lot of protective stuff to get into the castle. So I'll point some of them out. Also, as we go in, it's hard to see from here, but you'll see all the bottles in the walls. I mean, he loved to put bottles in his cement. And I remember as a kid, we saved all our bottles to bring to Michael.
Well, he would have a party and every invitation at the bottom say, bring bottles.
Yeah, so
you'll see bottles everywhere.
They like parties.
Radio.
It can't be that.
The old 8. It's an old 8-track.
Now, this is also where they knock through the reservoir. So you can see some of the reservoir wall right here, so that they can drive trucks into where they build their castle. So you can see this. But the next protective thing, if you come back here and turn around, you'll see there's a gate that can come down to. Oh yeah. I suppose you could have like boiling oil or something. And of course, there's a dragon, right? Staircase up there. Well, yeah. Well, this was sort of the central part of the tower. So, like, you get, you know, groceries, firewood, things like that. Put them here, you lift them up, and then they could be distributed throughout the castle. There's also gun ports on either side. And then finally, there's this gate right here. So if the bad guys were able to get through all those, they also had an escape tunnel. We'll go through the escape tunnel later. So let's go into the courtyard.
Yeah, now you're really sealed. They didn't even pour it out.
The stores. Maybe that's it. So let's come into the.
Oh my gosh.
So this is, and a few things have been changed. So this is the courtyard of the castle. Light, you can see this. If you look back up there, this area is known as the King's Quarters, which of course we live in the King's Quarters, but the King, Michael Rubel. If you look over here to this rectangular window, that was the pub or the bar. And unfortunately, I can't take you up there. It's pretty neat though. and you know, and then this area up here is often used as like a stage if there's parties, so like musicians will play out there. A couple of years ago on Michael Rubel Day, which Castle does every few years so that they'll invite the neighbors in. You know, they live in a tourist. But my band played up there and stuff like that. That was cool. Now this is called the Bottle House. Does anyone know why it's called the Bottle House?
Built out of bottle?
I think that's it. But this was, in a sense, the first structure. I don't know if you'd call it the beginning of the castle or not. But the story is, so, and you see that it's made, you know, mostly wine bottles and some gin bottles and, you know, whatever. Michael's mother, who had been a dancer in New York and so forth, and she, yes, yeah. With her sister, they had a dance act called the Dual Sisters. Her maiden name was Dual. And so, and they moved out here because her husband, who had been a gag writer and a joke writer for a radio and vaudeville personality named Joe Penner, he was big enough that Paramount wanted to make a movie for him. So he got here, but unfortunately his father died when Michael was like 6 years old, so he was quite young. And so that's one of the reasons Michael sort of became a free-range kid and, you know, went all over the, so what was that? But later when he got this, his mom was very social. She loved throwing big parties, and, you know, at least once a month she'd throw these big parties. And Michael was like, I don't understand these people. They just want to stay up all night and drink, and I need to go do stuff. So he built this house sort of to get away from his mom's parties. And imagine, and what I want you to do is go in there and take a look, but just keep walking in. And it's really neat inside, just the light coming through the bottles. But imagine before there was a central tower, it would have just been from all sides. It also has a loft up there where he would sleep. And he would say it's a built-in alarm clock, because as soon as the sun hits that, it doesn't do it anymore. It would get very hot in there.
There's the inside. Oh, look at the light. Look at how the lighting is in here. It's really cool.
You can see how they went up. They didn't use traditional scaffolding. You can see, like right here, these pipes came out.
Yeah.
So as they were doing it, they put pipes out here, put the boards on there, and they're about 6 feet above. You can see more. So this, as they went up.
Oh yeah.
You know, and Michael would often say, you know, look, I have one lifetime to build a castle. I mean, some of those castles in Europe took 200 years to build.
Right.
But he had one lifetime. So some of the workers didn't work as fast, and so they didn't get
I see that.
This is kind of, you can see here, and there's a couple of other spots where the reservoir, the walls of the reservoir.
Oh, so that's the original.
Yeah.
What was the height of the walls originally?
Well, there.
That's it, right there.
That's
So
right.
what, about
Right
12
there.
feet or maybe or something?
Something like that.
16.
16. Got
This
it.
has, the floor was originally about 6 inches below.
Right. So I don't know if everybody knows that. So this was all a
So-
round reservoir.
Yeah, so if you look, if you've seen pictures from above, the castle is round, so.
It's 168 feet in diameter and holds 165 to
180
Foot
million
acres
gallons.
or something?
I don't know. Anyway,
A lot of water.
almost 2 million gallons.
Okay, okay.
And anyway, and then, you know, as they're building, and they have, you know, put stuff in the wall because they want to.
And on the walls, you'll see little pieces of pipe sticking out.
Yeah, that's how I was just telling you, yeah, where
They would put a bar in each one and put a plank across, and
That's how they
built
continue
from
to
there,
build up.
keep going
Yeah.
up. And they did that in castles in Europe too.
Huh.
So this is in the early, sometime in the 70s, Glendora knocked down their city hall and their jail and all that type of stuff to build a new one, the one that's there now, I guess. And, you know, there's a lot of people sort of higher up in the city who were like, didn't like any of this. But there's a lot of people, because they love Michael, would let him, so they said, hey, we're doing this, there's probably stuff you want. So if you look at all the stuff around, at least on the first floor of the central tower, also known as the machine shop, but they're all like former jail doors. So, and then there's bars here and so forth. You can also see some of the scrap granite that was given that were not headstones and not
Made stairs out of it.
here and there's over there and there's some inside. You know, it's throughout the castle.
The granite came because Michael knew the stonemason that worked, and he would misspell names and so on. And Michael said, I want all the ones you don't need. And so he'd get them delivered to him, and you used to have the driveway completely done with them. But it was so uneven.
Right.
It would trip you about every other step. It was.
I think it was when the Glendora Historical Society, they decided that they needed to get rid of it. And there's some off to the side you can see. One of the things about that I should have mentioned when we were looking at the bottle house. So he built that basically with cement that fell off at a truck in a plant in Irwindale. You just go there with a bucket and get it and so forth. And from what I hear, and maybe you can correct me if this is not quite right, when they started to build the castle, he is like told one of his friends who happened to be very successful and very wealthy that he was going to go. He had to go get to because they were about to load up the trucks. He had to get them, and he's like, Michael, you can't build a castle with cement that fell off a truck. So he said, I will open an account at Ventura Historical Society, and you will just charge it to me. So there's tons and tons and tons of cement that he had. So there's a lot of things about this place that could have just not happened, except for the right thing happened at the right time. That was one.
Well, Michael made a pact with himself that he would place, when I say place, physically with bottles or rocks and everything else, 1 cubic yard of cement every single day. And he made it up with a big cement mixer you saw on the side of the big coming in. And he essentially did that for 20 years to do it.
All right, well, let's continue on. Unfortunately, we can't go up this tower. It's a very narrow and windy and stuff.
So John, Hans said before he left that we may have somebody working in the shop.
Oh yeah, there are blacksmiths. You can hear them hammering.
Yeah.
So we're going to go.
We're going to go that right in there. Okay, cool.
This is gonna be a hook.
Okay.
The giant sledgehammer head inside of the forge is
It's being remade into an axe head.
Into a
axe head.
Oh.
Yeah. We're taking an old worn out hammer and just swishing it out to make a big product.
And how long are you gonna have to heat it to get it malleable?
Well, it's we're running out of propane, so right now it's not getting hot enough to
actually move. But
yeah, we gotta go get some propane.
the initial start maybe 10-15 minutes, but because you keep putting it back in, that shortens down.
Oh, okay.
But my blacksmith who's working on it, she's also working on, like right now she's grinding out a letter in between waiting.
So for years he was looking for, because you can't go down to your local store and buy one of these, and so he put ads in trade papers, and he was a big ham radio guy. He would call like Europe and say, "Hey, do you ever like a church that fell down or anything?" Yeah. But finally, just through persistence, he found out that the Bausch & Lomb had this clock. It was built in 1890, and they had purchased it, and they started building their clock tower. But then electricity came to Rochester, New York, so they were like, "Oh, we don't want this old technology. We want the new stuff." So it was sitting in boxes for like 90 years at this time. Or actually, not quite 90 years ago. And but he just persistently got in, and I guess he was starting to bug him and stuff. It was like he was saying, "Well, probably just to get rid of you." They said, "We will sell it to you," and they said, "It'll cost you X amount of dollars." And he was like, "Oh, okay, thanks." But he happened to be with another one of his wealthy friends who said, "Well, I'll tell you a guy named Lorne Ward," and he's memorialized in the engraving, I can tell you that, who owned a bunch of McDonald's franchises and stuff. So he said, "Well, what's wrong?" He said, "Well, I found the perfect clock, but it's going to cost me X amount of dollars." And so Lorne said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I'll pay for your clock on the one condition that you can never tell anybody how much I paid, especially my wife." Anyway, so I did. Now another huge one. So this is a Seth Thomas rate-driven clock. There were 6 of them built. The only 2 that are still known to exist are this one and the one at the clock tower at Stanford University. Now, when Michael was a kid, his grandfather, not Rubel, but another grandfather, had gone to Stanford and was in the first graduating class along with President Herbert Hoover. And they took a trip up there, and when he was a kid, he saw that clock, and it's like, and then that sort of started his fascination with big clocks. And so we are sort of somewhat in touch with them. Because, keeping a clock like this running is, I mean, I'm glad last time I gave a tour, which was 2 weeks ago, the clock wasn't running. So it's good. So what we're going to do now, and this is one of my favorite, if you live this way and that way, it's one of my favorite views of the castle, because it's just sort of, all you see is castle. It's sort of like
Now I know why you're asking.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to go straight, and then at that door make a left, and we're going to see a little film on the phone. Going here.
This is the machine shop.
This is the machine shop. Safety third.
Plow deeper.
So we're going in?
Going in. Go straight or to the right.
This is the stuff I like. See, my garage is nice and neat. There's a lot of stuff here.
And your garage looks better. Now.
A few Coca-Cola bottles in here.
Older siblings. One was 10 years old. Was 10 years older than him, his brother, and that was Scott's father. And then his sister was 12 years older with him. So by the time he, sort of came around, they were off doing things, and especially by the time the father died, they were sort of off. Where and his older sister Dorchen, like Michael a lot, but they had different worldviews, I think. And so he, every gift-giving occasion, didn't know what to give this kid who was very different than all the other kids. So, but he knew they'd like to build stuff, so every birthday, every Christmas, he got a new hammer. So those are all the hammers that he got and so forth. So this is the central tower, and this is the machine shop and so forth. There's a couple of things. There's when it was being built, all these huge pillars and the wooden things, they were actually originally part of building, supporting railroad bridges over the 210 when it was being built. And then when it was done, they were like on the side of the freeway. And he was able to get them, and Glenn Spear, who I mentioned before, who was the original tenant in the box factory, he told me this story that when they got them, I mean, Michael knew he could use them, but he wasn't sure what he was going to use them for. And if there was somebody who lived here who had an idea, and one of the other guys who lived here said, "Okay, well, I've got an idea. I'll show it to you. What we're going to do." And so this went on for a couple of months, and finally, Glenn had basically he was starting to be an architect anyway. Made plans for this building this. And so he showed him to Michael, and he said, so they basically told the other guy, "You don't have any plans, we're going to do this." So this is where the impetus for it came. One of the things that happened, a little bit of a, I can't say a falling out, but a disagreement between Michael and Glenn Spear. That's the Glenn Spear wall right there, and that's the Michael Rubel. And as I said before, Michael said, I have one lifetime to build a castle, so Glenn was taking his time to make it all aesthetically nice, and Glenn was, and Michael was putting them up as fast as he could, and they had a little disagreement about it. So after this was finished, but it was finished probably a year after this whole thing happened, Glenn decided, well, maybe it's time for me to go off and do my own thing. So he moved to the Virgin Islands and became a very successful custom home builder and so forth. So, and if you notice this place, it's sort of built like a teepee. So the heat can rise and go out there, and if it rains, unless there's a lot of wind that pushes the rain in, it stays dry. But it also, in the summer, because it regularly gets to 100 degrees out here in Glendora, it's relatively cool in here. And this is often where they would come for lunch and so forth. In fact, they'd use this. This was an old mining thing where they'd put the ore in and they'd grind it up and so forth. We got this, but they'd put coals in there and either have like a soup bucket coming over here, or right behind you can see there's a grill on an arm.
Oh, yeah.
Swing over and they could grill stuff on that. So this is the machine shop. It's still very much in use today. This is where the blacksmiths, that's what they're called. Oops. They're all their stuff is here. When my brother still lived here and I was coming here, I used it to build a guitar, and so it's very much in use today, and lots of cool stuff.
Laundry room.
And we're coming through the laundry room. There's the bottle hall.
Yeah, I know. At the barber shop.
Look at that. Good old Bill. Ring the bell, Karen.
That's the kitchen.
That's the kitchen. Oh, gift shop. That had a gift shop.
So, come on in. So this is an amazing place. This was originally the Orange Packing House. And this is where Michael's mother would throw her big parties and so forth. In fact, here's some pictures of some of the big parties that were here. So, there'd be tables up here and so forth. So it's very similar to where it was back then. But sometimes I've seen pictures where there weren't tables, but there's like a stage and they had musicians on there and so forth. But this is it. A lot of really cool antiques and so forth. a couple of things that came here after Michael died, unfortunately. One of them is this organ, which is really cool for the fact that it was originally built to be, and was in fact, the organ in Madison Square Garden.
Oh.
It was built for the organist there. And it was there from the 1960 to the early 70s. The organ. So if you happen to be at a hockey game in that time and you hear dun, 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 that was the organ. It was later, then it was purchased by a church in New Jersey, and then it was purchased by a friend of Michael's who, his wife didn't want this big monstrosity in their house, so he donated it to the Glendora Historical Society, and it lives here. But Michael never saw it. Another one of the things like that is that canoe, which was donated by Dick Macy. He's our longest serving docent, but I love this canoe just because it's such an amazing work of art. It really is.
Wow. But this was the...
Now there's this was the Orange Passing House, and we'll look at some of the refrigerators that served as bedrooms and so forth. There's a really interesting story about this. This was an elevator that goes down to another storage area. In Michael's time, it was the wine cellar, and again, this is pre-Castle. President Eisenhower, at this time ex-President Eisenhower, was in Glendora to do a dedication for something, and his personal cook in World War II in Italy was someone named Florence Peck, known as Flo Peck, and she was here, and they somehow wanted to see him because they hadn't seen each other for a long time.
Very active international spy, actually.
She and her husband. I mean, that's a whole another thing. They're amazing. But anyway, so they came. He came here and giving a tour and stuff. There's no castle, but this place is pretty cool too. And President Eisenhower said, "Oh well, let me take the elevator down to So yeah, I don't know, but he was the ex-president, so he got to do what he wanted. And so he started to go down, and then like a fuse blew or something. So he was like sort of, his hand was about right there or something, stuck there, and Michael
that cut him down to size, didn't it?
Yeah, but I got him out. So there's a little story about it right here.
The wood planks you see in the floor, they're solid oak and they're 6 inches thick.
Whoa.
Because they had heavy equipment in there.
Yeah, because the whole packing house thing. And you also notice here, like there's bay doors over here, because this was the center of the business, so the trucks would come up and they'd take them out of the refrigerated storage areas. And you can see, there's a number of here. This was sort of the utility room or guest room or something like that.
It was also ice box.
Also, yeah, they were all ice boxes. They were, another one here. And this was Michael's grandfather. When he lived here, Michael's grandfather lived till I think about 1969. Very influential in Michael's life. And one of the cool things about it, if you want to look over here, if you've ever seen the movie Christmas Story, there's an actual Red Ryder BB gun on the wall. His grandfather was friends with Fred Harmon, who's the author of those pictures, and sent him for that. And then, of course, has anyone heard of Sally Rand? Well, Sally Rand was somewhat of our good friend of Michael's mother, and she was a fan dancer and bubble dancer and things like that. She was one of the people who started out as an actress, but didn't quite have the voice to go from talkies to from silence to talkies, because she kind of had a rough voice, kind of had a tiny mouth too. But anyway, so she became like sort of an exotic dancer, not quite a stripper, but that type of thing, and worked into like her 70s or something. And if you've ever seen the movie The Right Stuff, there is a scene where she's in it. It's not somebody playing her at a convention. There's the noon whistle.
That's it. Noon. Yeah.
And then there's stuff. One of my favorite stories about her, and Scott Rubel, the guy who's giving the other tour, he had his 10th birthday party here at when he was 10 years old. He had a birthday party and invited his friends and so forth. And I guess Sally Rand said, "Oh, well, great, I'll entertain the kids." And so did her thing, and he had a bunch of 10-year-olds going,
That's a memorable birthday.
You're right.
I wonder he had all the help.
just a lot of sort of relics from the thing, like how they pack the oranges and things like that. This is one of the last pictures of Michael taken when he was at the castle. In 2005, he had a major heart attack and went into a coma for almost a week and never came back to the castle. He got married late in life to his wife, Kaya, and she had a house a couple blocks away, and he stayed there for a couple of years before he died. So that may be the last picture of him taken at the castle. We're not 100% sure on that. But there's also, when the castle was finished, of course he threw a big party because he loved parties. And so this is all the folks who were really major builders, Skipper's in there somewhere and so forth. And just as a personal thing, that's the guy holding this plaque is my grandfather. Oh. That's my grandmother. That's my aunt. Oh. My parents would have been there, except for, unfortunately, I was graduating from college in New York, and they decided to come see me graduate rather than do that. Which I guess I was happy about the time, but now I wish I would say, and that's my mom and dad. What do you do? Now this was Michael's room before he built the King's Quarter was ready to occupy. So this is, not radically different from when he lived here. And this was often a place, after building days, they would come here, and because it was all refrigerated, and especially in the summer. And they'd go to the wine cellar and get some wine and talk about stuff.
And it stays pretty cool in here in the summer?
Well, it does now because of the air conditioning. Oh. Before the air conditioning, those rooms did because they were refrigerated. Right. This, not so much.
Got it.
So this is a really interesting. So you can see, you can see how it looks now. Round. And this is before the castle, although you can see that the bottle house was there. And then there was still orange groves up here. And this was taken as part of a National Geographic story on the flood of 1969.
Wow. That was the tour of the Rubel Castle as we leave now. What an amazing, unbelievably amazing, resourceful, quite an accomplishment.